3 months ago, I watched my parents smash a stranger's living room with baseball bats. Not out of madness, but because they thought it was my house and they wanted revenge. I'm Jessica Monroe, and I need to tell you how the people who raised me became the people I feared most. It started with a dream, a house I'd saved for over a decade. But when I refused to fund my sister's failing business, my family didn't just abandon me, they declared war. What followed was betrayal, harassment, a break-in, and a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes your bloodline is the first to bleed you dry. I was 35 when I finally saw it, the house I'd been dreaming about for over a decade. A modest 2-story craftsman with white trim, a porch swing and a kitchen that caught the morning sun just right. It wasn't just wood, paint and nails, it was my freedom. My declaration that I didn't need anyone, that I could build a life on my own terms, that I could exist without the weight of emotional blackmail, guilt or debt hung around my neck like a noose. For 10 years, I'd lived like a monk. While friends booked vacations or upgraded their cars, I packed lunch in plastic containers and walked to work, rain or shine. My clothes came from thrift stores. My furniture was scavenged from curbs and Craigslist. I coded late into the night, sometimes until my fingers cramped. I took on every freelance gig I could find, missing birthdays and holidays, skipping dinners, living off frozen burritos and dollar store pasta. Every sacrifice had one purpose: the house. My house. Because to me, owning a home wasn't just about having space. It was safety. It was control. It was escape. Escape from Amanda. Amanda, my older sister, was the golden child, the dazzling flame to whom everyone was drawn, even if it meant getting burned. She had charisma, the kind that could sell water to a fish and make the fish feel grateful. She had dreams, big ones, loud ones, always just one investor away from changing the world. And she had my parents wrapped around her perfectly manicured finger. Meanwhile, I was the background character, the quiet one, the reliable one, the "you're so lucky, you're smart" one. No one ever called Amanda smart, but they called her brave, driven, passionate. What they meant was reckless, manipulative, entitled. But when Amanda crashed and burned, and she always did, it was me who caught the shrapnel. This house was supposed to be my way out of that cycle. I thought I was finally free. So the night I told my family about it, I genuinely believed they'd be happy for me. We were sitting at the same oak dining table we'd gathered around since I was a kid. Mum had made her signature meatloaf, dry as always, but still considered tradition. Dad was in his recliner, pretending his back pain was worse than it was. Amanda arrived late, as usual, with her husband Bryce in tow, flashing his usual fake enthusiasm and too white smile. I should have known something was off the moment I walked in. Mum's eyes darted toward Amanda more than once. Amanda kept whispering to Bryce and hiding her phone screen. Even Dad seemed distracted, barely muttering his usual complaint about the neighbour's tree blocking his satellite signal. But I was too excited. I had pictures on my phone. I couldn't stop smiling. "I found it," I said, as we all sat down with our plates. "The house, the one I've been saving for." They all looked up. Amanda blinked. "You bought a house?" "I made the offer today," I said, practically vibrating. "It's beautiful. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a big kitchen with south-facing windows." "That's great, Jess," Mom interrupted, a tight smile on her face. "Really great. Speaking of big opportunities..." There it was, that shift, that calculated transition. that familiar cold flush of dread that hit me in the gut every time Amanda was about to unveil her next project. Amanda straightened, smile wide. Actually, that's perfect timing. Bryce and I were just telling Mum and Dad, we've got something huge in the works, something life-changing. I knew this rhythm too well. Amanda's voice dropped to that theatrical tone she always used when she wanted to seem inspirational. She talked about disruption, innovation, passive income. I stopped listening after a minute. I'd heard versions of this pitch before. Amanda 2.0, Amanda the CEO, Amanda the visionary. But this time, something was different. This time, everyone kept glancing at me. I looked around the table. "Why do you all keep looking at me?" I asked. Mum's fork paused mid-air. "Well, you've been saving for a long time, haven't you?" My stomach turned. "Amanda's business model is solid this time," Dad said, barely meeting my eyes. Bryce chimed in. "We're not asking for a handout. It's an investment. With the right capital, we could be doubling that money in less than 2 years." Amanda leaned in, that sugar-coated edge in her voice. "And you'd still be able to buy a house later, an even better one." Just like that, the walls closed in. My dream, the thing I'd bled for, was being sliced open on the dinner table like a roast. I wasn't family to them. I was a bank account with a heartbeat. Amanda didn't just speak, she presented. Bryce pulled out a laptop from his bag. He'd actually brought a projector, and within seconds my parents' dining room wall became a makeshift pitch deck. Graphs, slides, market analysis. Amanda's voice was smooth, rehearsed, almost hypnotic. I half expected her to hand out business cards. "This isn't just a business," she said, pacing like a TED Talk speaker. "It's a movement. We're revolutionizing local commerce through blockchain integration." I stared at her. "You don't even know how to code." "That's why we're bringing in talent," she smiled. "Which is where the initial funding comes in." I turned to Mum. "You let her turn Sunday dinner into Shark Tank?" Mum didn't flinch. "Jessica, hear her out." "I've heard her out multiple times. She's failed multiple times." Amanda's expression didn't change, but something sharp flickered in her eyes. She clicked to the next slide. Projected profits, inflated numbers, glorified fiction. I knew enough about software startups to see through it, and yet everyone was nodding. "Why now?" I asked. "Why this sudden rush?" Mum folded her hands like she was about to deliver a sermon. "Because I told Amanda you'd be able to help." My breath caught. "You what?" "I told her you'd saved around $120,000, she said plainly, like it was nothing. "We all know how disciplined you are." It felt like the floor shifted under me. "That was supposed to be private." "We're family," she said. "We're trying to, there are no secrets in family." But there were lies, and I was drowning in them. Twist 1 had settled like a pit in my stomach. Twist 2 landed like a punch. "There's something else," Mum added quickly. "Something we need to be honest about." "Here it comes." "When you were in grad school," she began, "your father and we took out a loan in your name, just for a small emergency. We meant to tell you, but what kind of emergency?" "To help Amanda pay off her second business failure," Dad muttered, eyes on his plate. I couldn't speak. The silence screamed. "It was $50,000, Mum said gently, "and we only needed a co-signer, since you weren't using your credit yet." "You forged my signature." "No," Mum said quickly. "We didn't forge anything. You signed a form once for tuition paperwork, and—" "You repurposed my signature for a loan?" I stood up. "You put $50,000 in my name without telling me, and now you want me to give her more?" Amanda finally looked nervous. "It's already affecting your credit, Jess. If the payments lapse, I laughed so hard I nearly cried. You want me to fix your screw up by giving you even more money? It's an investment, Bryce said, like a dog echoing its master. It's a betrayal, I snapped. Amanda's voice trembled. If you just help me now, I swear I'll double it. You'll have $240,000 in 2 years. I looked around the table, trying to find one face that wasn't complicit. You're all insane, I whispered. This isn't a family. This is a cult, and I'm the offering. Mum's smile faded. If you walk away from this, Jessica, you're walking away from us. I grabbed my bag, my heart pounding. I think I already did. No one stopped me. No one called after me. The door clicked behind me like the final note in a funeral march. The drive home was quiet, not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that thunders in your chest. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even blink when I parked in front of my tiny apartment. Just stared at the cracked pavement beneath my headlights and wondered if I'd ever stop feeling like a stranger in my own family's orbit. Inside, the walls of my studio closed around me like an old familiar cloak. The beige paint had chipped at the corners. The kitchen sink dripped at a maddening rhythm. A single lamp lit the room, casting long, warped shadows on the second-hand furniture I'd once been so proud of. It was all I had, but it was mine. I sat on the floor and took off my shoes like I'd run a marathon. And in a way, I had. Sprinting from emotional ambush to betrayal, and somehow still trying to stand upright. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, wondering how people like Amanda could move through life so easily, so entitled, while people like me had to work for every breath. It wasn't fair. But fairness had never been the currency my family traded in. By morning, I decided to check something I hadn't thought about in a long time, my credit report. Just a precaution. If what Mum said was true about the $50,000 loan, I needed to see the damage for myself. The results were worse than I expected. 2 open loans, not one. The first, $50,000, dated 3 years ago. The second, $20,000, taken out just 8 months ago. My chest went cold. I hadn't signed anything 8 months ago. I hadn't even spoken to my family in nearly a year at that point. And yet, there it was. My name, my information, my liability. Twist 3 hit like a second betrayal folded inside the first. They hadn't just manipulated me. They'd impersonated me again. I stared at the screen, nausea rising like a tide. Then I called my bank. They confirmed what I already feared. My signature was on the digital documents, except it wasn't. It had been lifted, copied, reused. I called an attorney. His name was Adam Grant. He listened patiently as I explained everything. My sister's failed businesses, the pressure to invest, the forged documents. He asked for copies of the loans and promised to investigate. 2 days later, he called me back. "There's good news and bad news," he said. "Give me the bad first," I replied, already bracing. "You technically signed a blanket guarantor form 7 years ago when your parents co-signed your grad school loan. That form allowed for limited financial action in your name under family emergency clauses." I felt my stomach drop. "They exploited that," he continued. "They used the old paperwork to justify the $50,000 loan, and likely argued the second one as an extension of the same agreement. But I didn't approve that second loan." "I know," Adam said gently, "but proving that in court would be messy, expensive, and emotionally devastating. And the good news? You're not legally liable for repayment yet. If they default, the collections process will go after all names on the account, including yours. I closed my eyes. They're already behind on payments, I whispered. I figured you need to freeze your credit immediately. He guided me through the process, placing fraud alerts, contacting credit bureaus, documenting every detail. But even with all that, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The people I once called family were now financial liabilities wrapped in skin. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table and wrote an email I never thought I'd send. Subject line, "You are no longer my family." In it, I listed everything, every betrayal, every forged document, every lie. I ended it with one sentence. "If you ever contact me again for money, I will press charges." Then I blocked them all. I changed my number the next day, deleted every shared photo on social media, blocked emails, removed myself from every group chat and mutual thread. I even cancelled the holiday postcard subscription my mother still used to send me family photos I never asked for. I didn't want a single piece of them anywhere near my life. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was also clean. No more guilt-tripping voicemails, no more passive-aggressive emails, no more being summoned as the family's emergency ATM. I was finally, truly alone, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. I gave myself a year. 1 year to rebuild, refocus, and reclaim the pieces of myself they'd tried so hard to reshape. I buried myself in work, took on leadership projects, grew my freelance business into a steady second income. I spent Friday nights reorganizing code libraries and Saturday mornings drinking instant coffee on the fire escape, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the world move on without me. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. On the first anniversary of that dinner table betrayal, I did something I never imagined possible. I bought the house, my house. It wasn't just any house, it was the one. The craftsman I'd fallen in love with a year earlier. Hardwood floors, a sun-drenched kitchen, a little backyard where I could one day plant tomatoes. I closed the deal on a Tuesday morning, signed the paperwork, and cried quietly in the back seat of the Uber that drove me there. The keys jingled like tiny bells of freedom in my palm. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not co-workers, not even my neighbours. I wanted this one thing to be just mine, a secret between me and the version of myself that had survived the worst of it. The first night I slept there, I didn't even unpack. I lay on the floor in an empty bedroom, staring up at the ceiling fan and breathing in the smell of wood polish and clean paint. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had won. Not against them, but for me. And for a while, I really did live like I'd won. Until Twist 4 knocked on my door, disguised as a Facebook notification. It came from Clara, a friend from college I hadn't spoken to in years. "Clara, hey, just saw Amanda's post. Didn't realise you two patched things up. Her house looks amazing. Congrats to her and to you." My stomach twisted before I even opened the app. Sure enough, Amanda had posted a photo album titled "The New Monroe Estate." Her and Bryce standing in front of a massive modern mansion, 6 bedrooms, marble countertops, infinity pool, luxury cars in the driveway. There were hashtags, 1 success story, 1 from the ashes, 1 Monroe Empire, and comments, hundreds of them. "So proud of you." Inspiration! Such a power couple. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, not breathing. She had done it. Somehow, she had failed upward again. Had I made the wrong choice? Had I walked away from family only to watch them rise higher than I ever could? I logged off and put my phone face down. I wanted to believe the photos, to believe that Amanda had changed, had matured, had made something real for once. That maybe, just maybe, I had been the petty one, the overly cautious one, the villain in a family success story, but deep down, I knew better. People like Amanda didn't change. They adapted, reinvented, camouflaged their failure in just enough flash to fool everyone except the people they'd already burned. And I had the scars to prove it. Still, doubt lingered like smoke in my throat. What if she was different this time? What if I had turned my back on them too soon? I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the kitchen I'd bought with a decade of sacrifice, and reminded myself of something vital. I wasn't envious of her house. I was envious of the illusion. And illusions, like Amanda's promises, always came with a price. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard their voices, since I'd seen their names pop up in my inbox or on my caller ID. 5 years of silence, peace, and autonomy. 5 years of rebuilding the pieces they'd left fractured and frayed. In those 5 years, I had built a life on my own terms. So when I opened my old email account, out of sheer curiosity, I didn't expect to find anything meaningful. Maybe some outdated subscriptions, old spam, or forgotten LinkedIn notifications. Instead, I found one message. Subject line: please come home, it's urgent. Sender: Mum. My stomach clenched. I hovered over it for a full minute before clicking. Jessica, I know you probably won't want to read this, but please, this is serious. Amanda is in danger. Real danger. Her life could be at risk. We need you to come home. This isn't about money. This is about family, about saving your sister. Please, just 1 hour of your time. That's all we ask. Mum, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. Amanda in danger? The logical part of me screamed manipulation. The emotional part, the one they'd trained for decades to respond to guilt and panic, whispered, what if it's real this time? I didn't reply, not right away. But 3 days later, against my better judgment, I found myself parked outside the house I hadn't seen since the night I walked away. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling near the shutters. The yard hadn't been mowed in weeks. 2 luxury cars sat in the driveway, Amanda's white Porsche and Bryce's gleaming black Mercedes. Odd choices for people supposedly in crisis. Still, I knocked. Mum opened the door. Her face was thinner. Her eyes ringed with exhaustion, or maybe age. Jessica, she breathed, tears forming instantly. Thank you for coming. I said nothing. Inside, the living room looked like a poorly rehearsed reunion episode. Dad sat stiffly in his recliner, not making eye contact. Amanda sat on the couch, face puffy and blotchy, clutching a tissue like it was a lifeline. Bryce hovered near the fireplace, arms crossed. The tension was thick enough to choke on. What's going on? I asked, still standing. Mom gestured to the couch. Please, sit. I'll stand. A pause. Then Amanda's voice, hoarse and trembling. It's bad, Jess. I turned to her, waiting. I lost everything, she said, voice cracking. The business failed. We invested too much too fast, tried to expand too soon. And now... Now what? Bryce spoke for her. We owe 150 grand. I blinked. To who? Amanda wiped her nose. Private investors, the kind that don't go through courts when they're angry. Mum added, they've been calling non-stop, showing up near the house. We think they're watching us. I crossed my arms. Why not go to the police? They can't help, Dad muttered. These people don't leave paper trails. The room fell silent. Twist 5 had arrived. Amanda wasn't a success story. She was a time bomb. You told Clara you bought a mansion, I said flatly, posted pictures, flaunted your comeback. Amanda looked ashamed, but not enough. We thought the business was stable when we bought the house. By the time things unravelled, it was too late. We had to sell it just to stay afloat. I scanned their faces, fearful, desperate, guilty, but not apologetic. And now you're here, I said slowly, asking what, exactly? For help? For money? Amanda shook her head. No, yes, but not just that. We're asking for safety. We're terrified, Jess. So was I said. When I found out you used my name to borrow money, when you all turned on me for not handing over my life savings. Mum looked pained. That was a mistake, but this is life and death. You said it wasn't about money. Amanda grabbed my hand, eyes wild. Please, I'm begging you. I don't know what else to do. Her fingers were cold and damp. I pulled away. I came here because I thought someone was dying, I said, not because I wanted to rescue you from your own irresponsibility. Bryce opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. No, you don't get to speak. None of you do. I gave you everything I could. And when I finally said no, you cut me out like a tumour. Dad finally looked at me. She's your sister. She's your daughter, I snapped back. Why don't you fix it? They had no answer. I turned to leave. Jessica, please, Mum called. If they hurt her, it won't be because of me, I said without looking back. It'll be because none of you ever taught her how to live without a bailout. The door shut behind me like a book slamming closed. I was nearly at the door when Mom's voice stopped me. Jessica, wait, she said, stepping forward with her palms out like she was approaching a wild animal. We wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious. I didn't turn around. You already asked. This isn't about the past, she continued, carefully measured. It's about survival. I turned slowly, locking eyes with her. And whose survival exactly? Amanda's or yours? Her lips thinned. We're family, Jess. That has to mean something. It used to. She moved closer. If you sold your house, just temporarily, you'd have enough to clear Amanda's debt and still rent somewhere nice. You're young, you can start over. There it was, the real ask. Sell your life, your sanctuary, your safety. So Amanda doesn't have to feel the consequences of her choices. I worked 10 years for that house, I said softly. Every birthday I skipped, every weekend I worked. Every meal I cooked over a 2-burner stove while Amanda ordered takeout and bragged about her next big thing. That house is my life's work. And Amanda is our daughter, Mum said quickly. We can't let her fall into the hands of... You let me fall? I interrupted. And you didn't seem half this concerned. Mum's expression hardened. This is different. How? I asked. Because this time there are scary men involved instead of scary truths? Amanda let out a choked sob on the couch. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't angry this time. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't breaking. I was ice. And they didn't know how to handle me like this. Jess, you don't understand the pressure we're under, Dad finally spoke, rubbing his temples like I was the one causing his migraine. We can't protect her from this, not without your help. I'm not her shield, I replied. I stopped being her insurance policy 5 years ago. Then help us as your parents, Mum pleaded. Help us protect our family. You made it clear I wasn't part of that family anymore. The room fell into silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Amanda was frozen mid-tear. Bryce was chewing the inside of his cheek. Dad was fuming quietly, and Mum looked like she might either scream or collapse. Finally, I stepped forward, calm and slow. I want something to be very clear, I said, my voice ablaze. You don't own me. You don't own my money, my house, or my forgiveness. You used up every ounce of goodwill when you chose Amanda's fantasy over my reality. You gave her everything and expected me to pay for it. We thought, Mom started, but I held up a hand. You thought I was the safe bet. The one who would always come through, the backup plan. You never saw me as a daughter, you saw me as a lifeline, but I've cut the rope. Jessica turned toward the door again, hand already on the knob. Please don't walk away again, Amanda whispered. I didn't answer, I just walked out. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that from the moment I walked through their door that morning, I had my phone recording everything, tucked into the inside pocket of my coat, voice memos running, every manipulation, every lie, every veiled threat. Twist. 6. I wasn't going to be blindsided again. I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that feels surgical, cold, clean, precise. The moment I got inside, I backed up the recording to 3 cloud locations, sent copies to my lawyer and added one to a secure drive. If they ever came for me legally, if they ever claimed I promised something, or tried to twist my words, I'd be ready. No more surprises. I sat at my kitchen table, staring out the window at the backyard I'd started to cultivate. A few herbs, some tomatoes, a rosemary bush that smelled like peace. I hadn't just built a house. I'd built a fortress, and I wasn't giving it up for anyone, not even blood. It had been exactly 7 days since I walked out of my parents' house, leaving behind their pleas, guilt, and the stench of desperation. I hadn't heard from them since. No follow-up emails, no midnight phone calls, no letters shoved into my mailbox. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally understood. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning and I was making coffee in my kitchen, still in pyjamas, when I heard a car door slam outside. I peeked through the blinds, cup halfway to my lips, and froze. Standing in my driveway, casually inspecting the flower bed I'd planted weeks ago, were my parents. Not Amanda, not Bryce, my parents. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was fear. How did they find me? I hadn't given them my address. I had moved states, changed numbers, scrubbed my presence offline. They weren't supposed to be here. I opened the door slowly. Mum looked up and smiled like this was a Sunday brunch and not a full-blown ambush. Jessica, what a beautiful morning. Why are you here? My voice was flat. Dad stepped forward, peering past me into the entryway. Nice place. Is that real hardwood? Leave, now. We just want to talk, Mum said, her tone syrupy and firm, like she was speaking to a customer service rep. She intended to manipulate. How did you get this address? Mum shrugged. Amanda hired someone, a private investigator. My jaw clenched. You stalked me. We were worried, she said, as if that justified it. You haven't been answering any messages. Because I don't want to talk to you. Dad pushed past me like he still had the right. We won't be long, Mum followed without asking. I stood in the doorway for a second, stunned, then slammed the door shut behind them. You can't just walk into someone's house. You're not someone, Mum said, walking through my living room like it was a real estate listing. You're our daughter. You gave up that right when you tried to sell me like a solution. Dad ran his hand over the kitchen counter. You've done well for yourself. I said nothing. You know, he continued, most people don't need this much space, especially someone living alone. There it was, the lead-in, the build-up to the next manipulation. Mum perched on the edge of the couch. You could rent a nice apartment, something cosy. It'd be easier to maintain, cheaper too. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. Let me guess, you've done the math already. Mom smiled, like I was finally catching on. If you sold this place now, you'd get a great return. You'd have money to spare, enough to help Amanda and still live comfortably. This again, I muttered. We're trying to protect the family, Dad said. You're trying to leverage me again. We're trying to survive, Mum snapped. Amanda made mistakes, yes, but you can fix this. You always fix things. I stared at her. You broke into my life. That's not fixing. That's violation. Don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. I'm being direct, I corrected. Get out. Mum stood, brushing imaginary lint off her skirt. You're being cruel. You've always had a cruel streak. That one hurt more than I let on, but I held steady. No, I've always had boundaries. You just never liked them. Dad moved toward the door, but paused beside the entry table, eyes lingering on a photo of me and Thomas, smiling on the porch. So this is the new guy? You don't get to ask about my life, I said. Not after the way you've treated it like it's disposable. They said nothing. The room hung heavy with unspoken things, regrets, anger, a lifetime of imbalance and buried resentment. I want you out, now, or I call the police. Mom gasped. You wouldn't. Try me. For once they didn't test me. They left, quietly, slowly, but they left. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, breathing like I'd just escaped a fire. As the door clicked shut behind them, I felt something was off. More than just their presence, more than their usual manipulations. I retraced my steps through the house, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Something about Dad's behaviour was odd. He'd lingered near the bookshelf longer than necessary, hovered around the kitchen island, subtly adjusting his phone in his hand like he wasn't just checking the time. And then it hit me. Twist 7. He had been taking pictures. I rushed to the front window and peeked outside. Sure enough, Dad was staring at his phone, swiping through something with a slow, methodical focus. He turned the phone to Mom, and she leaned in to look, nodding slightly. They weren't just snooping, they were cataloguing. I opened the door again, rage bubbling under my skin. Did you take photos in my house? Dad flinched but tried to play it off. Just a few shots, nothing invasive. Of what? Just decor, layout. It's a beautiful place, Jess. You've done well. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You were documenting. Mom looked at me with false innocence. Don't be paranoid. You're going to use those pictures to estimate the value, aren't you? Shop it around. Try to figure out how fast you can push me to sell. Dad's mouth tightened. We thought it would help you see what you could get. I didn't respond. I just pulled out my phone and began dialing. Mom's eyes widened. Jessica, don't. Try me. Dad reached forward, but I stepped back. You broke into my life again. You manipulated me, stalked me, and now you're preparing to use my own home against me. One more step, and this call goes through. Mom's expression twisted. If something happens to Amanda, it'll be your fault. There it was, the final blow, not a plea, not guilt, a threat. If she gets hurt, Mum continued, if those people do anything to her, you'll carry that forever. I stared at her, unmoved. If she gets hurt, it'll be because you all enabled her until she believed consequences didn't apply. I didn't wait for another reply. I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. I stood in the foyer for a long time, phone still in my hand, heart hammering against my ribs. The house, my safe place, my dream, my sanctuary, felt smaller now, tainted, breached. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the weight of it all, the threats, the photos, the fact that no matter how far I moved, they'd always find a way back in. They didn't want my help, they wanted control, and as long as I stayed in that house, they'd never stop trying to take it. By morning, my decision was made. I called Thomas first. "Hey," he answered groggily. "Everything okay?" "I want to sell the house," I said. A pause. "Wow, okay, fast. What happened?" I told him everything, about the surprise visit, the photos, the threats. They won't stop, Thomas. I need to be gone before they do something worse, something I can't come back from. He didn't hesitate. "Come here, we'll figure the rest out later." His words were a lifeline. I called my realtor next, told her I wanted to list immediately, told her I was willing to take a small cut if it meant a faster close. She said she had a buyer looking in my neighbourhood and that we might be able to push through within a week. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, packing and anxiety. Every creak in the house made my heart race. Every knock on the door made my hands sweat. But finally the deal was done. I sold the house, my house, the one I'd bled for, the one I'd built my life around. And as I loaded the last box into the back of the truck, Thomas wrapped his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You're safe now." I nodded, blinking back tears. I didn't know where this road would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. It wouldn't lead back here. It had been exactly 3 weeks since I'd sold the house. 3 peaceful weeks of early morning coffee with Thomas, long walks around our new neighbourhood, and the comforting silence of a life unbothered by drama. I was finally sleeping through the night again, finally remembering what calm felt like. Then the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognise, but it had my old area code. My stomach twisted. "Hello? Is this Jessica Monroe?" A deep male voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Officer Hughes with the Linwood Police Department. I'm calling regarding an incident involving your parents, Richard and Elaine Monroe." I sat down. Hard. What happened? They were arrested late last night for trespassing, breaking and entering, and destruction of private property. The words barely registered. "Where? At 847 Maple Street. Is that a property you used to own?" My breath caught. "Yes, I just sold it. What were they doing there?" A pause. Then the new homeowner came home to find them inside the house, vandalising the property. They were caught in the act. I blinked. Vandalising? What kind of vandalising? They broke a window to gain entry, destroyed multiple pieces of furniture, smashed a television and coffee table with baseball bats, and spray painted the words "traitor" and "ungrateful" on the living room walls. My mind went blank. Twist 8. They had staged a revenge scene on a house that no longer belonged to me. "They thought I still lived there?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "According to their statement, yes. They claimed you abandoned your family, refused to help your sister, and that they were reclaiming what you owed them." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "You're serious?" "Very. The homeowner is pressing charges. Estimated damage is around $40,000, not including emotional distress." I whispered, "Oh my God." "They're being held for arraignment. We'll keep you informed, especially if they attempt to contact you." I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the phone like it might explode in my hand. Thomas found me minutes later, still frozen on the couch. "What happened?" he asked, crouching beside me. "They broke into my old house," I said slowly, the words tasting sour. "They thought I still lived there. They destroyed it, Thomas, with bats, spray paint, like a crime scene out of a revenge movie." His eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "They wrote traitor on the wall, like I'm the villain in their story." Thomas pulled me close, but I was already spiraling because this wasn't just desperate, it was dangerous. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd obliterated it. And it didn't matter that the house wasn't mine anymore. In their minds, it still was. In their narrative, I still owed them something, still belonged to them. That terrified me more than I wanted to admit. I thought selling the house would end this, that without a shared address, a shared memory, they'd finally let go. But they didn't let go. They went to war, and they lost because they aimed their weapons at the wrong house. Still, I couldn't shake the image. My mother and father, two aging people who once rocked me to sleep and read bedtime stories, now swinging baseball bats in someone else's living room, screaming about betrayal, destroying someone's home because they couldn't destroy me. And for what? Because I dared to say no? Because I refused to let them use me again? I thought back to all the sacrifices I'd made over the years, the birthdays, the jobs, the relationships, the hours and dollars and pieces of myself I gave away, hoping they'd see me, love me, accept me as I was. But I was never a daughter to them. I was a resource, and now I was an enemy. Thomas rubbed slow circles into my back. "You're not going back there," he said softly. I wasn't planning to. They could have been shot. What if the homeowner had been armed? I hadn't thought of that. My parents could have died. Over me, over money, over entitlement disguised as love. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I sat quietly as the weight of it all settled in my chest. Whatever illusion I'd once held, that maybe they'd wake up one day, apologise, become human again, was gone. They weren't coming back from this, and I wasn't either. 2 days after the call from Officer Hughes, I got another update, this time from a detective handling the case directly. He sounded calm, but clipped like someone who had seen enough insanity to never be surprised anymore. "Miss Monroe, I just wanted to update you on the investigation," he said. "Okay," I replied, my voice tight with anxiety. "First," he began, "the homeowner who reported the break-in, Mr. Alan Davis, is a retired Marine. He served 2 tours overseas and has extensive firearms training." I stopped breathing for a second. "But luckily," the detective continued, "he wasn't home when your parents broke in. He arrived just as they were in the middle of destroying the living room and immediately called 911 instead of confronting them." A wave of cold swept over me. "He had weapons in the house," the detective said, "licensed, accessible. If he had walked in 5 minutes earlier, this situation could have turned deadly." I squeezed the phone tighter. I didn't know." "You had no way of knowing," he reassured me, "but it's a good thing no one was hurt." I whispered, "They could have been killed." "Yes," he said, "and all over a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I asked. "Well, that's how they framed it. At first, they claimed the house was theirs. Or at least they thought it still belonged to you." Their story was inconsistent. Of course it was. They're being held pending a court hearing, and the homeowner is moving forward with pressing charges. "I support that," I said immediately. "He deserves justice." The detective paused. "There's one more thing you should know." "Oh God, what now?" "Your mother," he said, "when questioned, she told officers that they weren't there to vandalise. She said they were reclaiming what was morally owed to them." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "She said, and I quote, 'Jessica owes us. She owes the family. That house was bought with betrayal. This is justice, a moral correction.'" I sat down, stunned. Twist 9, they didn't see it as a crime. They saw it as redemption. The detective continued. She said that because you were their daughter, and because you turned your back on family, they had every right to take back what was rightfully theirs. I was speechless. She framed it as an act of obligation, he added, that you had a debt of loyalty and they were simply collecting. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. A debt of loyalty. Yes, ma'am. It wasn't enough that I'd said no, that I'd walked away, that I'd given up trying to earn their respect and finally found peace. They couldn't allow it, because to them, my peace was theft. My boundaries were rebellion. My success without them was betrayal. And in their minds, betrayal deserved punishment. They didn't just want money, they wanted submission. After I hung up, I sat in silence, letting the weight of the detective's words settle in my chest like stones. They truly believed they were owed something by me, not because of anything they did, but simply because we shared blood. And because I refused to let them control me anymore, they believed they had the right to take back my home, my future, and my safety. Their version of love came with chains. I opened my laptop and added everything I just learned to a growing file, labelled protection. I uploaded the phone recordings, my notes, police updates, everything. I didn't know where this was headed, but I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Later that night, Thomas found me on the back porch, staring out at the stars. They think I owed them, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He'd already heard enough. They think family means I don't get to say no, that if I protect myself, I'm a traitor. He slid his arm around my shoulder. Then they were never your family. I nodded slowly. They're not done, I whispered. No, he said, but you are. And for the first time since this all began, I believed it. The legal process moved quickly. The homeowner, Mr. Davis, wasn't just furious, he was organised. As a former Marine, he approached the civil suit with the precision of a military operation. He submitted photos, statements, receipts, and repair quotes within days. There was no wiggle room, no chance for confusion or doubt. The damages totaled just over $40,000, and with emotional distress, lost work hours, and legal fees added in, the court awarded him a settlement of $60,000. It could have been worse. In fact, it almost was. Initially, the prosecutor considered pursuing criminal charges that would have carried jail time: breaking and entering, destruction of property, and trespassing while armed. But their lawyer, a fast-talking grey-suited man I recognised from one of Amanda's old social media photos, managed to cut a deal. No jail time, no criminal record, just restitution, therapy mandates, and a restraining order from Mr. Davis and the property itself. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something closer to indifference. Because they didn't escape consequences. Not really. To pay the settlement, my parents had only one option. They had to sell the house. Yes, that house. The one they'd once said was too precious to ever leave. The one they told me I could never understand because I hadn't built a family inside it. The one they weaponized during every conversation about Amanda's future as proof of their sacrifice, their roots, their legacy. Gone. The sale happened within 3 weeks. I didn't find out from them, of course. I heard it through Catherine, a mutual friend from childhood who worked in real estate and still kept an eye on local listings. She texted me out of the blue one afternoon. Catherine. Hey, I don't want to stir anything, but your parents' house just hit the market. Price is way undervalued. They're desperate. I stared at the message, then pulled up the listing. There it was. Photos of the living room where they once told me I wasn't part of the family. the kitchen where Amanda delivered her investment pitch, the front porch where I stood after they kicked me out, stripped bare, no furniture, no life, just a hollow shell being sold to fix the mess they created. Thomas came up behind me as I scrolled through the photos. "That's it, huh?" "That's it," I whispered. "What does it feel like?" I paused. "Honestly, like closure." And it did, because now they knew what it felt like to give something up unwillingly, to be forced to let go of a place they loved because of someone else's mistakes, to sell their comfort for the sake of someone else's consequences, just like they asked me to. Karma wasn't subtle, and it wasn't done. A week after the sale, Catherine called again. This time her voice was filled with something between awe and disbelief. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Try me." They gave Amanda the leftover money. I blinked. What? After paying the $60,000, they had about $30,000 left, and instead of saving it or rebuilding or retiring quietly, they gave it to Amanda. I let the words settle like dust. Of course they did. Even after everything, they still chose her. Even after the arrests, the trial, the humiliation, they doubled down. She burned down their lives, and they handed her the ashes like a bouquet. "Why?" I asked. Catherine sighed. "They think she can still make it back, that she just needs one more chance." I let out a laugh that was more pain than humour. "There's always one more chance." "They're renting now," she added, "a tiny apartment on the east side. Amanda, Bryce, your parents, all living together. All of them under one roof. I tried to picture it. Amanda pacing around like a queen with no kingdom. My father complaining about space and neighbours. My mother flinching every time a bill arrived. Bryce doing whatever it was he did when he wasn't tagging along behind Amanda's dreams. They called it loyalty, but it wasn't. It was addiction. Addiction to the idea of Amanda's success, to the fantasy that she'd one day make it big and lift them all to glory, even if it cost them everything else, especially me. They sold their home, their pride, to pay for the destruction they caused, trying to ruin mine. Then turned around and used the leftovers to give Amanda yet another lifeline. The symmetry was almost poetic, except no one was clapping. I looked out the window of my new home where Thomas was trimming hedges in the yard. Our home, quiet, clean, ours. And I realised I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity. I felt distance. Not the kind measured in miles, but in choices. I had made mine. They had made theirs. And we were no longer walking the same road. I didn't think anything could surprise me anymore, not after the break-in, the threats, the court case, the house sale. But then came twist 10. It arrived in the form of a second-hand conversation. Catherine, ever the reluctant messenger, called me again one morning, voice hushed like she was delivering classified information. "I wasn't supposed to know this," she began, "but I overheard it at the office." I waited. They gave Amanda the rest of the house sale money, all of it, 30 grand. I closed my eyes. "I figured you already knew," she added gently. "I guessed," I said. "I just hoped I was wrong." There was a pause. She told them it was her last shot, that if she could pay off the remaining investors, she could relaunch under a new LLC. They believed her, again. Of course they did, because when Amanda spoke, the world bent to listen, especially when she was drowning. I ended the call and sat in silence for a long time, the pieces of the past few months folding into place like a puzzle I'd seen too many times before. I'd walked away, sold my house, rebuilt my life, and still she found a way to funnel everything back toward herself. She didn't need me. Not directly. She had them. And they were always willing to bleed for her. But twist 11 came shortly after, and it changed everything. I got an email from someone named Elliot Kane, an account manager at a firm called Brass Ridge Capital. The name meant nothing to me until I read the subject line. Subject: clarification regarding Monroe family account. At first, I thought it was a scam, or maybe something my parents had signed me up for without permission again. But the email was professional, detailed, and oddly polite. Dear Ms. Monroe, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding a recent inquiry you may have heard about involving your sister, Amanda Monroe. I'd like to clarify the nature of our relationship and the events that transpired earlier this year. Brass Ridge Capital is a private investment group. Amanda Monroe approached us for a business loan to expand her boutique technology consulting brand. After reviewing her pitch, we offered a structured funding plan with a strict timeline for repayment and quarterly reports. Unfortunately, she failed to meet several key benchmarks, triggering a default clause. Our firm then began formal communication regarding repayment terms, which included phone calls, letters, and scheduled meetings. At no point were threats made, physical, verbal, or implied. Amanda's claims of being followed or harassed are entirely fabricated. We have documented records of every interaction, and we're happy to submit them upon request. We were recently made aware that Ms. Monroe had represented us as dangerous individuals to several family members. This mischaracterization is not only damaging to our reputation, but potentially libelous. We understand this may have caused distress within your family. Our intention is strictly business-focused. Please let us know if you have any further questions. Regards, Elliot Kane. Senior, Accounts Manager, Brass Ridge Capital. I reread the email 3 times. Then I laughed. Then I didn't, because what it meant was horrifying. Amanda had lied, not just exaggerated or spun the truth, but constructed an entire fantasy of being hunted, manipulated everyone around her into panicking, and used it to siphon more money from the only people still willing to believe her. She painted herself as the victim of mafia-like financiers, when in reality, she was being gently chased by a firm that sent reminder emails with bullet points and CC lines. She'd turned basic legal consequences into a life or death sob story, and she'd done it all to guilt me into submission. Twist 11 wasn't just that the danger was fake, it was that everything else had been engineered to force my hand. I stared at the ceiling and whispered aloud, how much of everything was ever real? Was the desperation real? The tears? The fear in her voice when she begged me to save her? Had she ever actually believed her own lies, or did she just know how to say exactly what our parents needed to hear? What I needed to fear? The implications sank like stones. She had let Mom and Dad go to war for her. She had let them sell their house. She had let them get arrested. She had let them believe that breaking into a stranger's home was their last noble stand. All for a loan she could have simply defaulted on. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. Then I sent it to Catherine. Then I sent it to myself multiple times in multiple folders across every device I owned. Because this wasn't just manipulation, it was calculated emotional warfare. Amanda had never been in danger. She just needed me to believe she was. She needed our parents to believe it too, because if we feared for her safety, she wouldn't have to face her shame. She wouldn't have to admit she failed again. And most importantly, she wouldn't have to grow up. That night, I lay next to Thomas, watching the ceiling in silence. "You okay?" he asked. I turned to him. She made it all up, I said. Every bit of it. There were no dangerous men, no threats, no people following her. Just a company doing what companies do when you stop paying bills. Thomas exhaled. That's psychotic. It's Amanda. She let your parents destroy their lives for a lie. No, I said. They chose to. He wrapped his arms around me, grounding me. And for the first time since all this began, I didn't feel anger. I felt sorrow. Not for what I lost, but for what they were never willing to see. Amanda didn't just lie. She rewrote reality, and they handed her the pen. The emails started slowly, first from Catherine, then an old neighbour, then someone from our childhood church who still sent Christmas cards. All of them sharing the same message, wrapped in slightly different words. Your mother wants to talk. I didn't respond. A few days later came a letter, handwritten. The envelope was plain. No return address, but I recognised the handwriting instantly. Flowing, controlled, familiar, my mother's. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen counter for a full week, watching it sit there like an unexploded grenade. Every morning I passed it, and every morning I whispered to myself, not today. When I finally read it, the words were exactly what I expected. Apologies, regrets, excuses masked as reflections. Sentences like, we didn't know how bad things were. We were just trying to help Amanda. You've always been the strong one, Jessica. We miss you. There was no acknowledgement of what they'd done to me, only what they had gone through. No mention of the forged documents, the manipulations, the break-in, or the court case. Only that they were grieving the loss of their family. Their loss, not mine. They still saw me as the one who walked away, the one who refused to forgive, the one who broke the family. It would have been so easy to fall into the old rhythm, to pick up the phone, to reply, to say something, anything that might soothe the ache I knew still lived somewhere deep inside me. Because yes, there was an ache, there was still a wound, there always would be. Sometimes I still dreamed about our old kitchen table, about laughing with Amanda before everything fell apart. About the way my father used to whistle while mowing the lawn. About Sunday mornings with cinnamon rolls and newspaper crossword puzzles. The memories weren't all poisoned, and that made it harder. Because toxic families don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like warm hands and homemade meals right before they steal your spine. I sat on the porch that evening, letter folded neatly beside me, and watched the sky bleed orange into dusk. Thomas came out and sat next to me, handing me a mug of tea. You okay? I got a letter, I said. He didn't ask from who, he already knew. I stared at the steam curling from my cup. Part of me wants to respond, just once, just to say, I hear you, I see you. He nodded slowly. But I know what happens if I do. Same pattern, he said. Same roles, I replied. They apologise, I forgive, Amanda implodes, and suddenly I'm the support beam again. He reached for my hand. And you're not that anymore. No, I said quietly. I'm not. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouted rejection or public statement. I didn't burn the letter or write one in return. I simply folded it, placed it in a drawer, and moved on. Because I'd already made my choice. They were my biological family, but they were never really my family. Not in the way that mattered. Family, I'd come to learn, was about who shows up when you have nothing left. Who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your wins without calculating what they can take from them. Family is who you feel safe with. And I had that now, with Thomas. With the quiet routines we built, with the simple joy of morning coffee and shared meals, and inside jokes whispered in bed at night. with the life we were creating, slow, steady, ours. I didn't need to reopen old wounds to prove I'd healed. Some people heal by revisiting the past. I healed by closing the door on it and locking it, not out of spite, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that not everyone deserves a second chance at your peace, especially not the people who tried to destroy it the first time. Spring arrived early that year. The trees outside our new house were beginning to bloom, soft pink and white petals fluttering in the breeze. I stood barefoot in the backyard, with a spade in my hand, planting the first row of rosemary and sage along the fence. The dirt was cool beneath my fingers. The sunlight warm on my skin. It felt like starting over, not escaping, building. Thomas came outside with 2 mugs of iced tea, his smile easy and content. "Everything's looking good," he said, glancing at the garden beds. "Still figuring out spacing," I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "But I think the basil likes it here." He walked over, handed me a mug, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I blinked. "What?" He dropped to one knee. No speech, no dramatic preamble, just, "Jessica Monroe, will you marry me?" I laughed, an actual bubbling, disbelieving laugh, and said, "Are you serious?" He opened the box. Inside was a ring that wasn't flashy or expensive. It was simple, elegant, my style, exactly. "Completely serious," he said. "I want to build a life with you, a quiet, happy, honest one, just us." I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, 1,000 times, yes. We didn't post about it. Didn't throw a party. We told a few close friends and started planning a small ceremony in the backyard, under the trees, barefoot in the grass, with a string quartet and mismatched chairs. We picked out flower seeds to scatter along the garden path. We talked about writing our own vows. For once, the future felt gentle, peaceful, ours. A few weeks later, as I was sorting through some mail, I found a cream envelope tucked among the flyers and wedding catalogues. My name was written in sharp cursive. No return address. I opened it slowly. It was from my mother. But this time there was no apology, no request, no plea for reconciliation, just blame. "You were always cold," she wrote. "You were always distant, even as a child. We did everything we could, but you never made it easy. Amanda needed more because she felt things more. You wouldn't bend, you wouldn't break, and that made you impossible to love." I reread that last line 3 times. Impossible to love. Not because of anything I did, but because I refused to be broken. She didn't want connection, she wanted control. And when I didn't give it to her, she rewrote the narrative to make herself the victim. I folded the letter and slipped it into the compost bin, right between the carrot peels and eggshells. I didn't need to burn it. I didn't need to respond. Because her words said everything I already knew. To her, love was conditional. And my greatest crime was learning to live without it. As I turned the soil over a fresh row of daisies, I thought about the family I was creating, the life I was planting, rooted not in obligation, but in choice. Thomas stepped outside a few minutes later, calling, "I just got the final confirmation from the band." "Great," I said, brushing dirt from my hands. "How do you feel about string lights around the fence?" "Perfect," he said, "like everything else you touch." And I smiled. Because, for once, someone saw me not as an extension of their needs or a tool for their goals, but as a person, a partner, someone worth loving exactly as I am. That night, curled beside him on the couch, I whispered a thought that had been blooming in my chest for weeks. "Do you ever think about family?" He turned to me. "Like starting one?" "Yeah," he smiled, "all the time." I nodded. "Me too." And just like that, something that once felt like a wound became something new entirely, a beginning. Because sometimes the family you choose isn't just better than the one you're born into, it's the one that finally teaches you what love is supposed to feel like.